What's going on YouTube? It's Teej, back again with another video, and today I'm giving you my Week 8 NFL Power Rankings. Excited to bring it your way. Hopefully you all enjoyed today's Power Rankings. If you do, hit that like button. It would help me, my channel, this video, all of it out a ton. It would mean the world to me. And if you're new to the channel, like what you see, want to see more football content like this in your life, hit that big red subscribe button and comment your takeaways from these Power Rankings from this past weekend of football, what you're looking forward with Week 8, and then also give me some video ideas. Maybe what are some things you want to see me cover as we move forward in the NFL season? Because if you want to see it, I will make it happen. Without further ado, let's jump into these power rankings. Not a whole lot of movement at the bottom, so we'll move quickly. Lions, Texans, Jags, Jets. Yep, that feels about the bottom 4 teams in the NFL. Miami is down a spot. You know, Tua ends up with 4 touchdowns, has some good box score stats. I don't think he was the problem, but he didn't necessarily overcome some of the other issues that Miami had faced in this matchup. They made it close with Atlanta, but ultimately the game-winning field goal from Younghoe Koo puts the Falcons on top. Washington football team down 3 spots. Look, no one expected them to go to Lambeau and come away with that upset W, but it was just the way they looked. It just looked like there was saran wrap right in front of the end zone. Just something about it was able to keep Washington out of the end zone. Now, I know Terry McLaurin did have a tutty in this game, but, you know, between the whole weird, Taylor Heinicke wasn't giving himself up. I don't know really why that was not ruled touchdown. That's a different discussion for a different day. But just something was holding back Washington, and this team just doesn't feel like they have that oomph to be able to overcome some of the challenges in front of them right now. Maybe this is a time where they jump in and try to sweep away with Deshaun Watson. I mean, I don't know. They need a lot more than just an upgrade at quarterback. I will say the defense did look better, right? Like, they put together a pretty solid first half against Kansas City, and they didn't let this game completely get away from. Like, you don't look at this game and say that Washington's defense is why they lost, which in a way is a step forward despite them falling back 3 spots. Philadelphia, man, I was really thinking they'd be able to at least be a little bit more competitive, but really what it ended up being was that first drive that was scripted looked pretty good for Philadelphia, and then kind of garbage time, if you want to call it that. Jalen Hurts, knows how to just pick up those stats. He's like a fantasy hero for that. Have been one of my fantasy leagues, actually. So he helps me out every week by doing this, but it feels like in the fourth quarter when the game is kind of done, he just finds ways to make it interesting and put Philadelphia back into it. Do you want to call that being a gamer? Do you want to call it taking advantage of when a game is done? I'll let you decide, but I was kind of disappointed with how Philadelphia performed this week against the Vegas Raiders. Atlanta up a spot. They beat Miami, they got to win, and they're clearly separating themselves from some of the teams at the bottom, which, is good. And Kyle Pitts, the man on your screen, that man is a stud. So they've gotten some better play out of Matt Ryan. The defense is still piecing things together. Younghoe Koo, one of the best kickers in football. Kyle Pitts, of course, like I said, a monster. So things are starting to look up for Atlanta, and maybe they'll start to climb up even more in these power rankings with the weeks ahead. The New York Giants up 4 spots at 24, and the Giants are really tough because they put together some good weeks where they should have beaten Washington on that Thursday night football game, and they beat New Orleans at New Orleans in that return. It was the first time the Saints have been playing in the Dome all year. It was their first true home game, and then they absolutely obliterated the Panthers. I mean, now I know Carolina isn't all that good, and that's a different talk for a different day. But also, I have to take this moment to just highlight, I know Carolina lost to the Giants, so a lot of people are going to say, well, shouldn't Carolina be lower than the Giants? Honestly, this 24 through 21 is pretty muddled. It's pretty much all teams in the same category, right? Teams with okay defenses that really have been struggling with QB play this year for different reasons for all of them. And the reason the Panthers aren't below the Giants is because I didn't feel that the Broncos nor the Bears deserve to be moved up. So I'm being a little petty there, but Carolina is down 2 spots, and really just think of this 21 through 24 as like its own tier. So I know the Panthers are still ahead of the Giants, even though the Giants clearly proved they are a better football team. There's still some quirks and some things that have to be worked out, but on the other side, there was no way I was going to move the Giants all the way up to 21. They're not that good. If you've seen the Giants when they haven't played good football, they are not the 21st best team in football. Moving on, Bears, Broncos, they stay put. The Broncos kept it interesting on Thursday Night Football, so they can at least say that, but they didn't feel like they were really in the same competitive zone or realm with Cleveland. That game just kind of weirdly stayed close. Part of it's because of the weather, and it's Case Keenum under center for Cleveland. So a lot of different factors there. And then for Chicago, hey, like, you got blown out at Tampa Bay. record-setting day for Tom Brady, 600 career touchdown passes. Sometimes you just have those, especially when you're not a good football team, right? Like if this was, a team in the top 10 that performed like the Bears, then that'd be a different conversation. Like if that was the Saints, someone in and around the top 10, that would be a problem. But it's the Chicago Bears. They're not in the league of Tampa Bay. They were at Tampa. Brady's out there breaking records and setting milestones. So, it happens. And they were just kind of on the short end of the stick. Talked about Carolina already at 21, down 2 spots. Now, again, like I said, think of the Panthers, Broncos, Bears, Giants in a tier of their own, and worry a little bit less about who's ahead of who and the head-to-heads and all that stuff. Seattle Seahawks coming in at number 20. They kept it close with New Orleans, but again, maybe part of it's the weather, right? Because, Sunday night and Monday Night Football both had to battle some of the storms out there on the West Coast. But that said, it just don't look good with Geno. It's like, I would love to make a bunch of excuses and caveats for why it wasn't all that pretty, but it's Geno Smith. Like, he's just not that good. And that's not any slander towards Geno Smith, but when you take this roster that is so top-heavy with stars like Russell Wilson and DK Metcalf and Jamal Adams and Tyler Lockett, and then you take away the biggest of those stars, yeah, it's going to look a little rough from that point onward. It's just like if you had the Rams and you took away Aaron Donald. Remember that second half against Green Bay in the NFC divisional round last year, and how the Rams just didn't quite look the same? It's a similar sort of principle, just for Seattle. It's an even more position value with their quarterback being gone. So Geno just doesn't look the same. Seahawks down a couple spots at number 20. Patriots up 2 spots, up to number 19. They took it to the Jets, but the problem is the Jets are, what am I, number 29 team in these power rankings? So it was good that the Patriots finally had that game where they floored somebody. Like, they just absolutely rolled over whoever they were playing, and they opened up the offense a little bit, did some more creative things, right? They have Kendrick Bourne throwing a touchdown pass, and still wanted to see Mac Jones, spread the field a little bit more, push the ball down the field, but nonetheless, they took care of business, and that defense continues just to give young quarterbacks problems, and a lot of credit there to Bill Belichick. That's something he still does at a very high level, and the Patriots made Zach Wilson and then ultimately Mike White not look very good in this one. Colts up 4 spots to number 18, and this is a good football team. Like, a lot of Colts fans think I don't like them, but I've just always been concerned about what Carson Wentz is going to be, and now I feel like I've seen enough games where, he's been hobbled and things haven't been ideal, like the weather, but at the same time, he isn't bad enough to cost you a whole lot of games. He tried to on Sunday Night Football, found a linebacker or two on a handful of occasions, but that said, he also made some big-time throws, and the running game is really potent, and it's enough that you can build a passing game off of that, right? It's Tennessee light, where the running game is so lethal that you could then force defenses to respect that. And the defense, part of it, I don't know if it's the weather conditions. It'd be interesting to see that defense against a Kyle Shanahan offense in regular conditions. But they did the job, and Elijah Mitchell kind of gave them some problems, but ultimately when push came to shove, they made the proper adjustments, and as the game went on, it felt like the Colts just got a little bit better and better, while the 49ers stayed a little flat. So the Colts are up 4 spots to number 18. And then we have the Pittsburgh Steelers. They were on a bye week, so they're staying the same. Changing the screen now. Minnesota, they are also staying at the same spot. Both teams were on bye. Didn't want to move them up because they didn't play. Of course, I could have put the 49ers here back down towards 18 where I had the Colts, move the Colts up, the Vikings and the Steelers both up a spot. I just got kind of weird about moving teams on a bye week. I don't know. Feels like you have to earn your way up the board. That said, I know San Francisco is still ahead in these power rankings. I am taking into effect the whole resume, right? The 49ers have played some tough games. They've played some games close. They were right there with it against Arizona, the last undefeated team in the league. So, again, think of these almost like tiers more so than like, oh, wow, 15 is just exponentially, it's just proving to be a better team. And it's also after week 8. Things are shifting and moving in a direction. So, like, 49ers the last 3 weeks for me have been falling while the Colts have been rising. So, if that trend continues, obviously next week, those two teams will pass one another. Sorry, another tangent about the rankings aside. 49ers, tough loss. I'm really starting to worry about Jimmy Garoppolo and that offense. And I know Kyle Shanahan's starting to, I don't want to say he's been put on the hot seat, but maybe put on notice. Feels like more than ever 49ers fans are irritated and upset with Kyle Shanahan, which is just a thing we haven't seen quite yet. We'll see how it looks with potentially Trey Lance coming back next week. If not, another week of Jimmy Garoppolo, maybe with more optimal conditions, that could go a long way. But I do think the good news is Elijah Mitchell looked really good against a pretty solid Colts defense. So that is a sign. of positive things building forward for San Francisco. I think Trey Lance is going to be the guy once he's healthy under center for San Francisco. Feels like, the Garoppolo, Shanahan, I don't want to say there's tension, but it's just, at this point, they have to aim for a higher ceiling. So while Lance may present a lower floor, he also gives you that higher ceiling. And if you're going to make the playoffs and make a deep postseason run, that's the type of play you have to make at this point in the year. Kansas City down 5 spots. This is in the title. These all big risers, big fallers. Kansas City, my second steepest faller, other than the Ravens you'll see on your screen now. But yeah, man, I'm really starting to get worried about Kansas City. The turnovers continue to be an issue. The offense just overall, it just didn't look like itself this week, which is super strange. And also now you got Patrick Mahomes able to, luckily enough, clear concussion protocol. But, what is his status for next week? We'll see. And the defense is just completely in shambles. So, I don't know. This is a really tough spot, and it's a position I haven't seen this Kansas City team in since the first year that Mahomes was a starter. And even then, they just didn't have as bad a turnover luck, and I don't know, the offense was just explosive enough to keep them in games. It just felt like they would have to score every game to win. Right now, it takes more than that, it feels like, because that defense is so bad. It feels like Kansas City has to play mistake-free football, and you can see that kind of translating towards Patrick Mahomes pressing and trying to do a little too much, and he then, in turn, leads to some of those issues that the offense is facing. So it's definitely a tough time to be a Kansas City fan. What you're hoping is, hey, Patrick Mahomes is an MVP and a Super Bowl MVP and the best quarterback in football when, he's playing at his normal level. And Andy Reid's been doing this for a long time. He can turn the ship around. But there are some issues, right? Like this Kansas City team needs another weapon outside of Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill. Maybe that's Clyde Edwards-Helaire whenever he comes back. Maybe it's finding someone on the free agent market. It's trades. I don't know. Pass rush definitely needs somebody. Maybe they're a team that's interested in Derek Barnett. I've seen that floated around. Then you could play Chris Jones back inside. I don't know. There's no one surefire fix to this team right now. And that's, I think, the biggest concern for a Chiefs fan. Instead, it's a bunch of, hey, we could do this to make things a little better. And we can also tweak this and make things slightly better. And you just got to hope that the Band-Aids start to mount up to where you could be able to stop the ship from going under. Will that happen? I don't know. Moving on, Cleveland Browns, they're staying pat here at 13. They did win. That game should not have been a 3-point differential between Cleveland and Denver because Cleveland definitely felt like the better team in that matchup. But for whatever reason, it did stay close. We'll see how long Baker's out. It didn't necessarily look better between Keenum and OBJ, which is obviously, not great. But Dearness Johnson was able to carry the load on the offensive side, and he looks like a Cleveland Browns type of running back. Part of it's the scheme, right? I think Kevin Stefanski's running game makes running backs look better, and that's not to take anything away from Nick Chubb, who is a top 5 to 7 running back in my eyes, and nothing away from Kareem Hunt, who is a starting caliber NFL running back in my eyes, maybe even top 15 if, he had a team and a workload of his own. It's a good running back room. It's a good scheme to be a running back for, so, that all looks good, but it just wasn't impressive enough, right? Like they should have pulled that game away, just like how the Bengals pulled away from the Ravens. You were kind of just waiting for the Browns to do something similar to the Broncos, but it just never happened. And Denver could have put themselves in position to have a chance to tie it, force it overtime, or ultimately come away with the win very late in that game. So that's a little bit of a concern. So I got Cleveland staying pat at 13. Baltimore down 8 spots. They're the biggest faller. And I mean, it's not that I want to take anything away from the Bengals in that win, but it's just I expect a little bit more of the Ravens, right? If you told me the final score was 41-17, I would have said, all right, yeah, Baltimore definitely was the winner. There would have been no shot in my mind. I would have said, all right, that was Cincinnati coming out on top. Just because the Ravens have pushed around the Bengals so much in their prior meetings over the past couple of years, since Lamar Jackson essentially has been the Baltimore Ravens starting quarterback, he has just given the Bengals more than they could ever handle, and he always, pats his highlight reels basically against Cincinnati. But this week, it was just different. The Ravens offense didn't necessarily look great. The rushing attack was, fine, but then they found themselves down by enough of a score where they had to start to air it out. The Cincinnati defense was just ready for it, and it's an improved unit overall. This was a big proving match for Cincinnati, not only on the offensive side, but on the defensive side. They proved that they could slow down Baltimore in an offense that's really, really good. It's not easy to do. But all that said, this is still a top 12 team in the league in my eyes. So part of the reason they fell is because I had them up to 8, right? Like they have that huge win over the Chargers. They really convinced me I'm sold on the Ravens. And then they just kind of come back down to earth. Luckily enough, Baltimore coming down to earth is still a really good football team. So if you're a Ravens fan, don't freak out too much. Also, there were a lot of teams who put on convincing performances and moved up the power rankings on their own accord. So that's part of why the Ravens cascaded a little bit down this power rankings. So again, top 12, still a really good football team. And the Saints are down a spot. I know they won, but it was just a 3-point win. It's tough to play in Seattle. They're a good team on prime time, so I'm not taking anything away from New Orleans. It's similar to what I just said about the Ravens, where other teams just earned moving up so much that it had to move the Saints down. So sorry, NOLA fans. I still think you have a good football team. It wasn't all that pretty on Monday, but part of that's just the weather. And ultimately, it was good to see no turnovers from Jameis Winston, and they found a way to win a close, gritty game in Seattle. That's something you can be proud of, despite falling down one spot in these power rankings. Raiders up 2 spots. But man, I'm starting to like them more and more. They are very big play oriented on offense, but they really embrace that in such a, at least fun to watch way, that you're just waiting for those big plays to happen for this Vegas team. And Derek Carr is continuing to play really good football. The defense is why they are in the top 10 though, because this team has taken a huge step forward, right? Yannick Ngakoue, Max Crosby, that is a legit, really good edge rush duo. They're getting solid play out of Casey Hayward Jr., I believe the top rated cornerback in PFF grading system. So that's really impressive. Trevon Merrick has been all over the place. So Gus Bradley's done a fantastic job coaching up that side of the ball, and they're limiting big plays, keeping the ball in front of them, and they're also gaining a lot of pressure, which in turn has led to them keeping teams off the scoreboard, which obviously helps out a ton. And then when they hit those big plays on the offensive side, and they won this game without Darren Waller, which I'm sure you've heard 1,000 times now, but that's another interesting, compelling element to this. Foster Moreau looked pretty solid and made a nice touchdown grab. So this Raiders team just finds a way. Now, I also see them being potentially really streaky, so maybe this is just them on a hot bend, and then they're going to kind of come back down to earth, go on a 2 to 3 game losing streak, then go on another heater. We'll see. That I can't tell you. I can't see the future. But I do like this Raiders team and the grit that they play with. Kind of feels like that old school Raiders style. Cincinnati Bengals, one of the biggest risers of the week. They're up 6 spots, up to number 9. That was... when I was doing my picks for the week, I described that matchup as the kid who's at the kids' table at Thanksgiving wanting to sit at the adults' table. And I didn't think it was going to play out in the favor of Cincinnati. I thought, Baltimore was going to come away and maybe they'd be the team to win by 41-17. That's kind of what I was envisioning, and a kind of shock to put the Bengals back in their place. But Cincinnati proved me wrong, and they earned it. So now they are a top 10 team for a damn good reason. So they are at the adults table now, to continue with that analogy, and they are in the top 9. The offense looks really, really good. They have so many playmakers. It allows Joe Burrow to get the ball out quick, negates where that offensive line still might not be great. And like I said when I was talking about the Ravens, that defense proved itself. I'm not going to call it an elite unit, but it is a above average unit at the worst. Luke Wilson continues to play really good football. The D tackles, including DJ Reader, are playing really solid football. Trey Hendrickson has proven to be worth the money so far. The secondary is playing at a high level. Jesse Bates continues to be a stud. I can't sing the praises about this Bengals team enough, honestly. They proved it this week. And plus, Zach Taylor is getting better, and it's amazing. You look at Cliff Kingsbury, Zach Taylor. They were the guys that 3 months ago I would have told you they are the most likely to get fired midway through the season. And now they're going to become the poster child for coaches who were on the hot seat fighting for, hey, let me get through year 3. Hey, let me get through year 4. And then you'll see the whole thing come together, because those two guys finally have put together what they want out of this football team, and it's all come together in a really big way. I mean, case in point, at the season end of the day, the Cardinals and the Bengals will be the number 1 seeds in the NFC, AFC, respectively. I mean, that'll help you keep your job, no doubt about it. On to the top 8, the Chargers, keeping them at number 8. They were on a bye week. I still like this football team. Like, they're in the top 4th of the league or thereabouts. So, like LA where they are. Tennessee, the biggest riser of the week, up 7 spots. And part of that is because I didn't move them up a whole lot after the Bills win. I was, a little reserved. I was like, okay, they got Buffalo that one time. That's interesting. Primetime games can always be weird. Additionally, Josh Allen doesn't slip. How does that game play out differently on that 4th and 1 just in front of the goal line? This week, they may have beaten a worse team, at least as it stands right now. I think Kansas City's not as good as Buffalo, but they did it in such a dominating way that I had to move them up, right? Like, the defense was suffocating, and they played a lot of cover 1, man-to-man. They just went right at Kansas City. They played an aggressive style on the defensive side, and on the offensive end. They didn't need Derrick Henry to run for 200 plus yards like I thought he was going to. He did get a passing touchdown, which was an interesting and creative score there for the Titans, but they won in a different way, and they still pushed around Kansas City. So now you're looking at back-to-back weeks where they knock off the Bills and they knock off the Chiefs, and that has to put the Titans in contender status. This upcoming week will be a big one for me to really see if this team could be, that top 5 to 6. If you go back to my preseason power rankings, I had them as a Super Bowl contender. I really like their roster because the dudes can just take over at any point. That said, the Colts are a really interesting matchup for this Tennessee team. I think the Colts match up pretty well with them, especially on the defensive side. So how does Tennessee go at Indianapolis? And if they come away with a win this week, that's pretty convincing. It's not fluky or anything like that. If they truly beat the Colts, I will be all in on Tennessee as a serious Super Bowl contender. But I am holding off that just one more week. I'm keeping that one reservation, that one caveat, 1 week longer. The Dallas Cowboys are at number 6. They move up a spot. Good football team. Like what they could do on the offensive side on a bye week this week. So this was kind of me breaking my rule here where they moved up. But yeah, they're a really good team, and I'm excited to see them take on Minnesota this upcoming week in prime time. Green Bay, they took care of business against Washington, and maybe that game was a little closer than it should have been, but because the Ravens are falling down, Green Bay moves up, and sometimes that's just the trademark of a good team, finding ways to win close games. And now they've done it back-to-back weeks against Chicago and Washington, which before the year, I would have told you were really interesting games for me to watch because I expect those defenses to be even better than they actually are, especially the Washington defense. Chicago did enough on the defensive side to kind of slow down Green Bay until the Packers pulled away and the whole I own you thing. We already talked about that last week. But in specific, this week's matchup with Washington was one I was really intrigued by coming into the season. And the Packers were able to just handle business. They were the better football team, and they look like it. So I moved them up a spot. They're in the top 5. Rams, I know it wasn't always pretty, right? They were even losing for a little bit of this game against Detroit, one of the weakest teams in the NFL. But a lot of people on Twitter were calling that the Lions Super Bowl, and hopefully they play with that much fervor and veracity moving forward. But that was clearly a pretty big game in the eyes of the Lions, right? They pulled out all the stops, all the fake plays that you run on 4th down. They got really creative with special teams, and hey, good on Detroit for trying to be innovative and creative and find ways to create extra possessions for their offense, especially when you're not the better team. But the Rams still handled the job, and they still came away with a W, and nearly did it by double digits. So despite everything Detroit threw at them, the Rams weathered that storm and came away as the victor. And again, credit to Detroit. They were creative. They tried to pull one on the Rams, but the better team won. And you can do those gimmicks, but sometimes they don't last but so long. And ultimately, LA just kind of put their foot down and were the better teams in this one. The Bills, the Bucks, the Cardinals stay pat at 3, 2, and 1 respectively. Right now, that feels like the best 3 football teams in the NFL. And I think the Rams maybe could be added into that tier, but right now I feel like the Bills, the Bucks, and the Cards are in that top tier by themselves. Serious Super Bowl contenders. Bills on a bye week, Bucks with a huge W, and the Cardinals, things are a little close there with Houston for the beginning portion of that game, but then they ultimately pulled away. And again, like I just said with the Rams and with the Packers, the better team wins the game, and that was the case with Arizona this week. But that is going to do it for my Week 8 NFL Power Rankings. Tell me what you think down in the comment section. Who do I have too high? Who do I have too low? Where do you think I can make some movements and some shifts moving forward? Love to have your thoughts, and tell me what you're excited for this upcoming week of the NFL season. Hopefully you all enjoyed today's video. If you did, hit that like button. It would help me out a ton. And if you do the channel want more sports content like this in your life, hit that big red subscribe button. That's going to do it for today's video. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. And until next time, my name is Tej, and I'm signing off.